We've got the whole crew together as we cover Ohio State with our instant analysis from Ohio State.
There's something that doesn't feel right.
Unbelievable effort from him today. Is E.J. Liddell going to crack the first team All Big Ten?
I think he can be the guy. I'm not trying to start a quarterback controversy.
He seems to have the durability. He certainly has the toughness. This is the question on a lot of people's minds here. Welcome to Buckeye Breakdown. Well, good morning, everybody. Happy Thursday as Ohio State gets ready for Arkansas State this weekend. And welcome back to Buckeye Breakdown. For the first time, we're doing this on camera. We've had a few of our Building the Buckeyes episodes available as audio only, but we're going to bring this on camera for you so that you can hopefully have a better user experience as we tell you a little bit about what we think the future of Ohio State football and basketball looks like. I'm Brendan Gulick along with Andrew Lind. You can follow all of our content on Buckeyes Now on Sports Illustrated in lots of places, buckeyesnow.com, on our social media channels, Buckeyes Now SI, and of course right here on our YouTube channel. If you subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell so you know whenever we post new content and we can keep you up to date with all the latest info around the teams. Andrew, this was a huge weekend as we talk about the future of Ohio State football first here. An unbelievably important weekend, maybe not a bigger weekend in recent memory than what Ohio State just had with Notre Dame in town for week one. We talked about it in a few of our other shows, but my gosh, to have 60 high school kids that are all really highly recruited and many of them uncommitted to go watch the Buckeyes play Notre Dame in that environment and to ultimately see Ohio State win that game. I'm sure the Buckeye coaching staff and player personnel staff are feeling pretty good about what they put on this weekend.
For sure. And that number ended up ballooning to more than 100 different prospects being on campus. The list that we had going into the game was just more or less the number of kids who had kind of made their intentions known ahead of time. And obviously some people show up, if they can make it for, whatever reasons, if they don't have a game or whatever. But yeah, I mean, really the atmosphere was unmatched. The visitor list, I haven't really seen something that big since maybe the Michigan game in 2018. So yeah, there was a lot of important pieces on campus. And then to obviously have, as we mentioned in some of our previous shows, all of the alumni back, having LeBron James there. Jason Tatum, Andre Iguodala from the NBA. Like there's people who aren't even actually connected to Ohio State that were there, just kind of adding to that whole situation.
And how fun for some of those kids who probably knew that LeBron James would be there because Bronny was on campus. The idea that there's going to be lots of former NFL players, and maybe that's where they feel a little bit more closely connected. But as you and I were down standing on the field behind the end zone pregame, I mean, I heard kids talking about Jason Tatum's here. It just sort of gives the impression that, hey, this is a big deal. This is where everybody wants to be, whether or not they're directly connected with one of these two programs. And I have to think that in this world of, photo shoots and all the things that go on social that these kids are doing to prop themselves up during the recruiting process, that probably plays a part in all of it.
Yeah, and it was really interesting to see, there a lot of the players, a lot of the recruits were standing over by the former players on the east side of Ohio Stadium on the field. And then as soon as LeBron walked in, literally every single one of them just took off running to the other side, waiting in line pretty much to get a picture with him and, dap him up and all those kind of things. So yeah, it was a pretty cool experience for them. And then just, like we said, I think Evan Turner was there as well. So that's why Jason Tatum and Andre Iguodala made the trip. But yeah, for them just to be in that situation, be able to take pictures with him, talk about it, like all that is very important attention for Ohio State. So, they're never going to turn down the fact that they want to show up, because that just is, especially like you had mentioned, in today's kind of society where everything is, Instagrammable and, post them on Twitter and those kind of things. Like, even that one picture that a recruit may have gotten with LeBron or with Bronny, his son, or, any of the other former players, like that all helps Ohio State.
We didn't have a chance to ask Ryan Day this when we talked to him either post-game or on Tuesday, but perhaps we'll find some time during his quick lightning round with the media on Thursday after the Ryan Day radio show. But I did see him talk to LeBron briefly pregame. And I have to imagine that exchange was something along the lines of, "Hey, great to see you, and thanks for being here, and thanks for treating our kids, and our recruits as well as he has," because Coach Day knows that's a big deal. And even though the connection with LeBron's son is obviously more tied with the basketball program, LeBron's been a huge outspoken supporter of Ohio State football, and I would imagine that Ryan Day is probably pretty grateful for that. So we'll see if maybe we have a chance to ask him about that.
I'd say, and then I also saw Brian Hartline, the wide receivers coach, come up and say stuff to LeBron too. And their time in Miami, because Hartline was with the Dolphins for a bit, their time in Miami kind of overlapped. So I'm sure they got to know each other that way. And he even made a comment after the game, that his son would be a good wide receiver. So there's a little bit of fun being had there. And I think that you never know. I mean, he's not going to come and play football. LeBron was obviously a very talented football player as well in high school, but his future was in basketball. And I think the same thing goes for Bronny. But it just kind of speaks to just, the overall celebrity of it, and being able to, the coaching staff know who they are and those kind of things. I mean, it does nothing but help for Ohio State.
We'll talk about Bronny in a bit here. I want to stay focused on the football side for a moment. This was obviously an important weekend for some defensive ends. There were several 5-star defensive ends that are uncommitted, that were, widely considered maybe some of the more important guys to be in attendance because the Buckeyes are pushing hard for them. What's the latest on Keon Keeley, Damon Wilson, and Matayo Uiagalelei?
Yeah, so I mentioned the other day that Luke Montgomery, Ohio State's offensive tackle commit, had actually told all three of them that they were going to be able to get a photo with LeBron. You have to remember, Luke actually played on the same AAU team as Bronny. So there's that relationship there with LeBron where he could have, purposely set that up. And basically all three of them told him that if they were able to get a picture with LeBron, that they would commit to Ohio State. So I think it's, it's kind of one of those things like, maybe they were saying it a little bit tongue in cheek, but I think for him to be able to come through on something like that is really important for all three of them. And then, it's just a matter of, none of them seem particularly close to a decision, but it's always important for Ohio State to get them on campus for these kind of things, these big games. And then, maybe later in the year, maybe they can get them back on another visit, but it would be an unofficial visit. Like they would have to make their own way out, but, for Michigan or Iowa or something like that. So, just kind of setting that precedent of an official visit and saying, this is what we offer, we dare the other schools to kind of match that.
Anything that you're, whether you're hearing or reading or just gut feelings on where the Buckeyes stand with those three guys? I mean, is there an imminent commitment in the works from any of them?
I wouldn't say exactly right now, but I do think that, based upon what I'm hearing, it's really an Alabama-Ohio State battle for Keon, who was a Notre Dame commit. So it had to be really weird for that coaching staff to know that he was there, wearing Ohio State stuff against them. That ship, him kind of staying with Notre Dame, is kind of sailed at this point. But, I actually feel very strongly about him ending up at Ohio State, though Alabama's kind of the school that trends with most of the media and stuff like that, just based upon that relationship with Montgomery and Brandon Ennis and those guys. And then, Matayo is a little bit, it's an Ohio State USC kind of battle. I think that, the distance is always going to be a challenge for a kid like that from California. But I do actually think that, there's an opportunity for Ohio State maybe later in the year. Next year it's going to be an interesting situation when CJ Stroud goes off to the NFL. They're going to have three relatively unproven quarterbacks on the roster. So they might be in the market for, a quarterback through the transfer portal. And I know his brother DJ is currently the starter at Clemson, but I do think that, there's that opportunity if Cade Klubnik can ultimately take that job, that he may enter the transfer portal, and Ohio State may, want to say, hey, you come over here, you can play with your brother, all those kind of things. So I think that's something maybe later in the year, especially if his recruitment maybe drags out past the early signing period into like actual national signing day, that's something to pay attention to.
Andrew Lind stirring up quarterback controversy for 2023. We haven't even played 2 games yet in 2022, but I love the storyline. That could be fun. We'll have to see if that maybe helps the Buckeyes with a potential commitment from Matayo. A couple of other guys that I think we could touch on. How about the wide receiver teammates out of Florida? You've got Jeremiah Smith, who obviously has NFL ties in his family. and his high school teammate Jojo Trader.
Yeah, I think that if there's one player who I'd be really keeping an eye on for commitment, it would actually be Jeremiah Smith. I know that, this summer there was a lot of talk about that, and just him coming from a high school that has already produced Kenyatta Jackson and Ryan Turner, and then he's on the same 7-on-7 or was on the same 7-on-7 team this past year with Brandon Innes, Carnell Tate, Mark Fletcher, Cedric Hawkins. Like there's a long line of that South Florida Express to Ohio State pipeline. So yeah, I mean, if there was somebody who I thought that this weekend could have really had an impact on, it may have been him. And then obviously, him being teammates with Jojo now, that's only going to be able to help Ohio State. Of course, I guess the depth that Ohio State has at the wide receiver position might hurt to be able to say, okay, well, we're going to pull two more 5-star wide receivers again, because I mean, that's what they've been doing. The roster is literally going to be packed full of them. But then again, it's really hard to go against Hartline in those situations because, I mean, he's proven that he can do it time and time again. So, yeah, I mean, I think that's where Ohio State is most likely to add, to that class alongside Dylan Raiola, who was there, and that he shared pictures of them, in full uniform and that kind of stuff. So, yeah, I think that's kind of trending in Ohio State's direction.
I just find it so fascinating that basically this Florida to Ohio State connection has developed the way it has over the years and constantly is bringing forth some of the better players in Ohio State's program. Why, in your best estimation, why has that worked so well?
I mean, that's a good question. I think that, maybe dating back to the Bosas who were South Florida kids and came from St. Thomas Aquinas, which is one of the more notable high schools in Florida, and then maybe even nationally. And then for them to come up to Ohio State and have the success, and then, just kind of, it's really just about maybe the culture and getting it started, because it's, oh, hey, I see this one player who I went up against, or I know, or I played with, having success up at Ohio State. Maybe I can go and do the same thing. So it kind of just, goes from there. You had Damon Arnett up here for several years. He had success, was a first-round pick, and I know that he hasn't had the greatest NFL career, but that's just another example of somebody who did come up from Florida, one of those better schools. And it also has to do with the fact that, Miami hasn't been great. Florida hasn't been great. Florida State hasn't been great. And that's going to make it a lot easier for them to go down into those schools and say, or into that state and say, hey, come up here, compete for national championships, or stay down there and go 7-6. Like, I don't think that's a really hard sell.
I wonder how much the college football playoff expansion is going to maybe even that playing field a little bit, because Florida right now, I mean, look, Billy Napier he's kind of a madman, but he's really good. And they have poured a boatload of cash as a university into their football program recently. I have to think that they're going to start recruiting a little bit better and go back to where they think they can be in the SEC. Florida State is a really talented program that is constantly like trying to get over that hump. They've been there. They certainly can get back there. They just haven't had the guys to do it. And obviously Miami's all in on Mario Cristobal, and it certainly feels like that program is moving in a good direction. So I'm interested, and obviously as a Buckeye fan, certainly hopeful that Ohio State will continue to get some of the better kids out of the state of Florida. But I think there's going to be a lot of people watching how that evolution goes with an expanded playoff and those programs more easily able to sell their kids on, hey, you're going to have a chance to compete for a national title here.
Well, and I think the important thing to note is just the amount of talent that's in Florida. It's not like, in Ohio, there's every year 8 at most kids that are Ohio State worthy, that, if Ohio State doesn't get, you'd be kind of surprised at the same time. But I mean, in Florida, you literally can look at the list, and I think that like Cedric Hawkins, for example, he would be a top 5 player in the state of Ohio, but he's clear down at like 30 or 40 in the state of Florida because there's just so many players down there that are elite, Division I prospects. And I think that, so maybe Ohio State doesn't get every single one of them. I mean, they're currently not getting every single one of them either, but I'm just saying, like, even if those schools, kind of take a step forward. And I don't expect all three of them to do it at the same time. I don't think that there's been really any point in history, maybe besides the late 90s, where they were all, really, really good at one time. So I don't expect it to be like a thing where all of a sudden they all get good at once and then there's just no prospects at all.
One more on the football side, and then we'll switch to hoops for a minute. There's another kid that I think a lot of people are interested in learning more about, safety Peyton Woodyard, and just the time that maybe he spent with Dylan Raiola this weekend.
Yeah, and let's not forget, he's also one of Matayo's teammates as well. So I think that, it's kind of just that St. John Bosco, they produced Wyatt Davis. Ohio State had a commitment from Jaden Woodby out of there as well, but he ended up going to Florida State. So, Ohio State has a really good relationship with that school. And, he has a really good bond with Dylan. I know that Dylan, when he was here over the summer, had mentioned that Peyton was one of his top targets, that he wasn't going to let up. And then, I'd look at it from Peyton's standpoint as well. Notre Dame is probably the biggest challenger to land his commitment. So to be able to put that on the field right in front of him and say, this is where we are as a program, this is where Notre Dame, the other school that you're considering, is as a program, which one would you rather be a part of?
Yeah, well, we'll find out. The Buckeyes certainly have made their push and continue to be, front of mind for a lot of these top end kids all around the country. We obviously also had some basketball news this week, and before we wrap the conversation with Bronny James, Ohio State lost a commitment on the basketball side from George Washington III, and he was obviously a kid the Buckeyes were pretty excited about. Can you give a little context around that?
Yeah, so it's really interesting in the standpoint of him being the very first commit in that class, and he kind of helped build, bring on others, Scotty Middleton, Austin Parks, Devin Royal. Like, he was a big part of bringing them on. But I think that Ohio State has kind of realized in the last couple of months, especially after getting Middleton's commitment last month, just where they stand as a program, because they're kind of starting to take that next step to, on the recruiting trail, which then should, in turn turn into them being an Elite Eight, Final Four kind of team. And I think that Washington is just a little bit below that. And I think that it kind of with Tyson Chapman, a guard from Minnesota on campus this weekend, who is a higher ranked prospect at that same position, with him being on campus and them kind of trending with him, I think it just kind of, both Washington and Ohio State kind of saw the writing on the wall and said, it's kind of one of those things where there might be somebody out there who's better. We can bring him in. And, from Washington's perspective, he kind of says, okay, well, they're looking at somebody else. Maybe it's time that I move on.
Sure, it's got to be difficult when a kid is committed and you're all fired up about your future, and then something happens somewhere along the way where maybe you realize that it's not how you thought it was going to be. And I'm sure it was disappointing for Washington, but wish him well as he tries to find the right place for him to play his college hoops.
Yeah.
Perhaps some of that was revolving around the fact that I would imagine Ohio State and every other program in the country is all in on Bronny James. They reiterated the fact he's got a full scholarship if he wants to come here this weekend. How realistic is it that Bronny James could be a Buckeye?
Well, I think that what you mentioned is kind of the first step in that. And before this weekend, he actually did not have a scholarship offer. So then for him to, come to campus, and I know it's his dad probably wanted to be a part of that, just that situation too. But so, maybe he ends up making that trip, even if Bronny isn't a part of it. But for him to come and, spend time around Chris Holtmann and make his first, known recruiting trip, kind of, make it known that he's interested in Ohio State. That's obviously the first step in that. And then, there's schools like Oregon, which have a lot of Nike money. His dad has $1 billion, endorsement deal with Nike. There's USC and UCLA, which are where his dad is currently with, his dad's with the Lakers. And, I think that there are many factors in it. And I don't think it would be right of me to sit here and say, oh, Ohio State has, this % chance, because nobody knows. Like even when somebody said a couple weeks ago, somebody reported that Oregon was leading, LeBron came out and said, no, that's not true. And you'll hear it from us first. So, I think it would be a little bit irresponsible to say oh, Ohio State has a 70% chance or something. But I do think that him making that trip this weekend, his dad have already been, has already said on numerous occasions that he would have played at Ohio State had he went to college. Those things all help. And it's just a matter of, continuing to build that relationship with the staff and saying, hey, Ohio State is the best place for you to become an NBA player and then get to that next level.
I know there's a lot of fans that watch Ohio State football, basketball, and other sports that would sure love to see Bronny James wearing the scarlet and gray and all the hype that would come around with that, in addition to his talent.
Well, I think that's an important part of it too. Is even from Ohio State's standpoint, I don't necessarily know how good Bronny James is going to be because one, he's not his dad. Like everybody knows that. But at the same time, you also wonder if maybe he gets a little bit more hype because he's his dad's son. I don't think we're really able to evaluate the type of player that he is. But I think that in the end, Ohio State would be willing to take that chance because of all the attention that he'll bring, all of the notoriety, all that kind of stuff. And then if he does end up becoming a really good player, which he does have the talent to get to that point, maybe he's not a one and done player. Maybe it takes him 2 years to get to the NBA or whatever. But if Ohio State can get him, bank on that notoriety and then produce him into an NBA player, that's only going to pay dividends down the road as well.
Yeah, and perhaps, maybe Bronny's, potentially being on the Buckeye roster helps bring in a couple of other players that, may have considered going elsewhere otherwise. Maybe they want the opportunity to play with him and all that would come with that. So it'll be really fun to watch. In fact, the Big Ten Media Day for basketball is coming up here pretty soon up in Minneapolis. It's hard to believe that basketball season is on everybody's mind. I think Big Ten Network today, I know they released the women's basketball conference schedule as we shoot this on Wednesday, and we'll make this podcast available on Thursday. I think the Big Ten men's basketball schedule is also supposed to be announced today, if not on Thursday. So basketball season is not far away, that's for sure. And Ohio State is certainly hitting the recruiting trail hard, both football and hoops. Andrew Lind with all the latest on building the Buckeyes. We certainly appreciate your time on that and look forward to doing this again here soon. Thanks, Andrew.
Thank you.
All right, find everything you need to know on BuckeyesNow.com. Subscribe to our YouTube channel as well, and you can find us on social media, Buckeyes Now on SI. For Andrew Lind, I'm Brendan Gulick. Thanks for tuning in to Buckeye Breakdown, this Building the Buckeyes report. We'll have these for you here pretty regularly throughout the course of the fall to give you all the latest on the Ohio State recruiting trail.